Gut health has always been a popular topic. I think it's become more popular in the bodybuilding industry over the last few years, which is good. People should want to focus on gut health, but the gut microbiome is so complex, and even the top researchers in the world say we still need more information.
Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Astrid's, your APD, your dietitian with T, no C. And I've got with me today a registered dietitian, just like me, Austin Kjergaard. I
Nailed it.
tried
Got it.
my best with your last name, but it's just like a very new name, last name to me. So let's talk about you, Austin. I have been looking forward to speak to you and have this conversation because I love speaking with other registered dietitians, listening to their background, their motives of becoming a dietitian in the first place, and understanding a little bit more why you do what you do and what led you to choose the career and the history you have so far in not just in dietetics, but also bodybuilding and in the fitness industry. So tell me more about you.
Yeah, thank you. No, you did great. The last name is a complicated one, so most people get it wrong. So, about me, I have been big into fitness most of my life. I was going to go do college sports. Got to college to go do college sports, saw a bunch of people get injured. Didn't really think that that was worth it for me because I really loved being in the gym and training and lifting at the time. And some of these athletes had like career-ending, they had multiple concussions, they had torn ACLs, LCLs, different things like that. I'm like, I'm not really sure that I'm not gonna go pro. Like this is just to keep playing sports. So I'm done. I don't want to like have those type of injuries before I can't do anything else. So moved back home, went to school at a local college, and got really big into fitness and personal training, and I did that for a bunch of years. And then I was working at a supplement shop that had a dietitian, and was kind of getting to know that dietitian a little bit, and I was like, this is obviously where I want to be. Like, I was just super passionate about nutrition. So I ended up going back to school again for a different degree in nutrition and dietetics. And along that time, I was working as a fitness manager. I was managing multiple gyms, going to school, was competing in bodybuilding throughout all of that time as well. Yeah, what I had noticed, especially like in the fitness industry and in the bodybuilding industry, is there's a lot of coaches putting their clients through extremely crazy protocols and hurting them. By hurting them, meaning like I've heard stories where women, they were so messed up that their physician said they probably would never have kids. They really had to fix their health. I mean, I know people that have been coached by someone, end up dying. I mean, like crazy, crazy things.
Wow.
And I was like, this is hard for me because my moral compass was at a point where I could only do so much with my clients. And at the time, the legality system here in the States was different. Like, if you were going to give nutrition advice to certain people, you couldn't legally at that time. I know a lot of like things have changed in different states on some of those policies. But at the time when I was going through this process of wanting to go back to school, I just I didn't really have anybody at the time I could trust to refer out because there was no dietitians in bodybuilding really that I was aware of. Now this is a long time ago, mind you. And so I was like, all right, I can collaborate with some dietitians and say this is kind of what they need to look like or do. And, but again, it was just kind of hard to find because there wasn't a lot of specifics at that time. So decided to go back to school, become a registered dietitian. So that way I didn't have to worry about referring anybody. I know that I could trust, like if they're coming to me, I can help them in every sense of the way. I didn't have to be like, sorry, I'm not a dietitian. I can't like legally help you with this situation. Um, and so I just wanted to be able to help all of my clients, whether, they're a type 1 diabetic or whatever, they have kidney disease, this and that. Or if they just had general health problems. Like I've got a few uh, bodybuilding competitors that have issues like SIBO and things like that. So, just trying to help them through that situation and what their goals are. And that's why I just wanted to make sure that I can help educate clients, help educate people, be a resource, and make sure that people aren't dying for this sport. I understand, and I'm sure we'll get to that later. There's a risk reward to competing. Death does not have to be one of them. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be one of them, especially because, it's for trophies and medals at the end of the day. So yeah, that was a big inspiration for me to go back to school, is to make sure I can help educate people, and just put out more information that you do not have to do these things. And people tend to make prep a lot harder on themselves than they need to. So,
Your story sounds so similar to mine when I decided to become a dietitian. I started very early in the fitness industry. I was like 12 years old when I was doing classes, and I started sort of like digging into becoming a personal trainer and teaching classes and things like that. But around me, there were so many personal trainers doing diets for their clients. But to me, like they were so all the same, they were similar. There was no rational calculation of macros or like prescription of a specific customization of depending on the client's requirements. Like there wasn't diet history or like any sort of like medical history or anything. So to me, there was like so many red flags. Obviously, at that point, 12 years old, I have no clue. To me, that's like, oh, that's cool, that's great. But the more I've sort of like started questioning things, it was like I feel like there's something missing here. And that's when I started digging more into dietetics. But the reason I suppose most of dietitians tend to decide to go to school and become a dietitian is to do that, like write and prescribe diets and give yourself your own diet, I suppose. Like to me, it was like I want to be able to just write diet for everyone and just be myself, the fittest I can ever be. So I think that's kind of like the push that you have it at the beginning. But when you actually start your degree, you realize that nutrition and the bachelor's of nutrition is so much more than just a diet. Is so much more in depth, and there's so much more clinical aspects that you wouldn't even think about that's part of your degree. Biochemistry, anatomy, like so many things. Now, you mentioned that that was a big component of why you were interested in becoming a dietitian. What was the area that you enjoy the most? Like maybe at the start and currently, I think you also currently do work in hospitals as well, or in private practice. Tell me more about that.
going into college, I was like, oh, I think sports dietetics was the route I was going, because I was thinking sports, bodybuilding, powerlifting, like that. And then when you really started to learn more about like what sports dietitians do, it was kind of like, I'm not really sure that that's what I want to do. Like, yes, I would like to learn that, but I don't think that that's the field, because I was relating sports dietetics to like the sports that I coach, right? And I knew that they were going to be, but like the role of a sports dietitian, while impressive and amazing, I was like, I don't think that's what I want to do. So I was like, I'm going to go through college with an open mind. I'm going to learn these things, and how can I apply it to my clientele and my demographic, right? And then when I started taking like advanced human nutrition and like medical nutrition therapy classes and things like that, it was incredibly fascinating to me, because there are people that are regular gym goers, CrossFit, bodybuilding, powerlifting, whatever, and they have some of these medical nutrition therapy problems, right? And so it was just fascinating to see a deeper level of nutrition and how things can impact people. Pancreatitis, liver disease, kidney disease, briefly talked about SIBO, chronic like ulcers and wounds, just amputations, all sorts of different things, chewing, swallowing disorders. It was a really cool to see nutrition in a different light of like, this is how nutrition modifications can improve these people's health outcomes. And so when I did my internship in a hospital, I was like, this is pretty cool. Like, I want to find a way to tie in both professions. And I never thought I would be into clinical, like going into college. So, yes, I do work at a hospital. I do clinical nutrition. I own my own private practice as well. They're two really kind of full-time jobs. And again, as I continue to advance in my career, I'm finding more physique athletes I work with. A lot of them start to come to me because I am a dietitian because they're like, you get both worlds. They're like, we want help with our clinical. Like I had mentioned, I have clients that have SIBO right now that they were like, we read all these things on the internet. We don't know what to do and how to navigate our bodybuilding career through SIBO. And it's like, well, yes, then that's one of the reasons why I'm here, why I'm a dietitian, because I can help you navigate through that, especially when we get to peak week, because a traditional peak week for somebody is going to look different than a traditional peak week with somebody with SIBO, for example, just because of the situations that they have. So that's again things like I work with SIBO patients all the time at the hospital. I work with people all the time. So every once in a while, when I have a client that has that situation, I'm like, I can help you with that, especially wrapping it around the sport of bodybuilding or any barbell specific sport. So yeah, I like to be in both worlds.
You brought up SIBO so many times, and I think not everyone that is watching this today has a clue what that means. So do you want to talk me a little bit more about what SIBO is and why is that such a, I think it is, it kind of like became a buzzword for a long time, like, oh, if you have SIBO you are like completely fucked up and like there's something wrong about you, and that's what is not allowing you to lose weight, and like there was so many myths around it, and it was like just a buzzword, like gut health and like microbiome, like they all have their place, but they were like misused words. So maybe just explain us a little bit what is SIBO and why is that so important to kind of like diagnose and treat?
Yeah, so the SIBO, like what it stands for, is going to be a little bit self-explanatory. So it's small intestine bacterial overgrowth. So it's exactly how that sounds. We're having some bacterial issues, if you will, with inside our small intestines. And a lot of things that people run into, it can be constipation, it could be potentially even diarrhea, bloating, all of these things. So gut health has always been a popular topic. I think it's become more popular in the bodybuilding industry over um, the last few years, which is good. People should want to focus on gut health, but the gut microbiome is so complex, and even the top researchers in the world say we still need more information. However, we do know that there are foods out there that can cause some irritation, foods that we may need to minimize the symptoms, right? We're trying to adjust to the symptoms because if we can improve the symptoms, we can probably better improve digestion, which could potentially improve to better absorption of the nutrients we're trying to eat, right? So a lot of times it's educating my clients or educating people on like let me like I just kind of take a deep dive into what they're eating. Let me see what you're eating. Also, because people don't realize this, how are you preparing your food? Because even how you prepare your food could impact your symptoms with something like a SIBO, or if you're having gut health issues, how you're preparing that food could be causing that. Like a big common one, like are you eating raw vegetables or are you cooking them? Are you cooking them? Are you cooking your food thoroughly or are you not? How are you time temperaturing food? It could just be you're not cooking any of your foods all the way through to where they should be, making it harder for your body to want to digest and break those things down. So that's a big piece of what I mean when I'm talking about SIBO, and it's just interesting because I'm bringing it up because I've just had multiple clients come to me for that type of situation or a related gut health issue. So I think and we can get into this later, but like I, I like flexible dieting. I think flexible dieting is very beneficial for people. It allows more food freedom. However, I think sometimes with that food freedom, people can get a little overboard with it, right? So they're choosing different food sources. So they start having maybe some gut related health issues. And so it's kind of re-educating like, hey, like flexible dieting is good, but also you're having some of these issues because we're probably over consuming one thing and not consuming enough of another thing, right? It's that sense of balance that we all love and talk about. So, anyways, that's kind of what I mean when I'm talking about SIBO and kind of I've been trying to educate people more on just navigating through their diet and food preparation.
Do you have any different approach between someone who has SIBO and IBS, for example, when it comes to dietary choices, low FODMAP diet, or like, do you have to reduce fiber or not? at all? Do you see any difference in the terms of like how you approach your recommendations for dietary intervention?
It's a great question. I wouldn't say a huge difference. It's also depending again, like what are the symptoms? Because some people's symptoms for IBS, they might have one or two symptoms that are in that IBS category, and then they might have different symptoms if it's SIBO. And what I mean by that is like they can have similar symptoms, right? But like I'm just looking at the symptoms and the issues that they're having. And so, for example, like you had brought up fiber, right? Like if there is a certain point where they're having inflammation and some sort of problems with like symptoms, it is not going to make sense to shove a bunch of fiber down their body. But on the contrary, we also need to make sure we're having fiber because they could be having some, bloating and constipation, but are they having other symptoms as well? So it's kind of like a back and forth of like how are you feeling at this point in time? And the low FODMAP can be a great tool. I know people get scared of the low FODMAP because it is so restrictive. I have a kind of a system that I use with my clients where it's kind of a modified elimination diet because we need to find those triggering foods for people, right? That's a big part of whether it's SIBO or whether it's IBS symptoms. We need to figure out like what are these trigger foods. So there is a time for both individuals where it's like we need to start here and then we'll kind of navigate things back in and we'll try to figure out what is the cause. But like I said, I also look at their lifestyle factors. I look at things such as like food preparation. I look at their sleep and I look at their stress as well. So.
Yeah, 100%. It's incredible how everything that has to do with mental health, lifestyle, and stress management has so much more impact than people think on their gut health and like, or even inflammation, gas production, gut motility. Like people, just by being nervous, you may get a explosive diarrhea just because you're stressed and very nervous. I remember that the first time I taught a fitness class, I was so stressed and so nervous to fuck it up or whatever that I had like full horrible diarrhea before my class, and then I had no problems because I was so nervous. And I think apart from that, a lot of people kind of like blame foods that they have the culprit, they're the culprits of their issues, and it's likely like the food has nothing to do with it. And it's more their lifestyle, the stress, their sleep, their anxiety. A lot of people with a lot of like mental health issues that are overpowering the actual gut health and gut state. So yeah, I want to ask you in more depth now that we've kind of gotten into the route of dietetics and everything that you do at the moment. What is your typical or your favorite type of client avatar that you like to work with? And given that you are kind of like clinical, you like that clinical aspect, but also you like the sports and the fitness and the bodybuilding. So what is that person that you feel like that is a typical person I really enjoy working with?
I like it when people come to me with like, they just say they want to feel better. I like those people because there's a lot of versatility there. A lot of times when someone's like, I just want to feel better, they're up for whatever. They're up for like, I want to lose a little bit of weight so I can feel better about how I look. I want to have better energy. I want to become stronger in the gym. I like working with people like that because, again, there's just a broad range of things. Like I have a lady that I'm training, she did a couple bikini shows. She's like, I might want to compete again one day, but I just want to feel better. She did CrossFit for a long time, and she may never compete again, but she's a mom of two. She busts her butt in the gym. And from the day, like we've been working together for over a year now, from day one when I met her to now, she looks like a completely different person. She's eating like 2,300 calories, completely reshaped her physique. Again, mom of two. I love working with people like that because they just don't have excuses. They just find ways to prioritize their health and fitness. And I think some of it's because it's inspiring their kids to be better. So that's probably the person that I enjoy working with the most is just somebody that is a fitness related person and they just want to feel better. They want to perform better. Whether that's performing better for like physique sports, performing better for themselves in the gym, or just being able to do, you know, uh, things that they didn't think that they could do, like lift 400 pounds and eat 2,300 calories, things like that. So that's the type of person that I enjoy. I love working with my bodybuilding and prep clients because again, they kind of fall into that category. They do have a goal, but they also are doing it because they want to feel better. They want to look better and those types of things. And again, most of the time, at some point, they might have some issues that I can help them with as a dietitian, right? Life comes up, things comes up, so they can reach out to me and say, "Hey, I just found out I had this. Cool. We can still work together. We can still navigate and work through that." So yeah, that's kind of what my ideal client, I guess you could say.
What has been maybe like a very, very hard case of a client that you had worked with before that you felt like you even doubted about your skills as a dietitian? Like, have you had that type of client that kind of put you in the spot of like, I am doing everything you've told me. I have been following the plan to the T, and I'm not losing weight, or I am not achieving the results I was imagine I would achieve, given the fact that I'm putting 110% of the effort that I am doing, and I am following everything that you tell me. Have you had that kind of like have clients and how you navigated it?
It's a good question. Yeah, I thankfully have not had that too often, but I have had it a couple of times. And usually, if they're like, I can no longer lose weight, I'm just stuck. I've even had the opposite where people are like, I'm gaining weight really fast and I feel like I shouldn't be. If something is going wrong, like they're being honest and they're truthful in telling me that like their sleep is in order, their hydration, their movement, they're not they didn't change anything specific to their diets, meaning like they didn't all of a sudden just start drinking like four fully loaded sodas a day, or they didn't start putting barbecue sauce and everything, and they weren't like, I first dive into exactly what they're eating, and then I go into the stress and the sleep aspect of things, then the hydration, then the fiber content. I look at all of those different areas, stress being a big one. And sometimes I'll find what's going on and we can address it. Other times, like I said, like there have been times where like everything is reportedly perfect, but things aren't going in the right direction. So typically, I'm glad this has become more popularized. I will ask my clients to get blood work done. I look at blood work every single day in the hospital. And so they will get their blood work done, and I will look at whatever that lab result shows. I like to look at thyroid hormones. I like to look at testosterone, estrogen, estradiol, and stuff like that. I like to look at kidney functions, liver functions, electrolyte labs. I like to look at all of those things. And if something is off, if that thing is off, does it align with the concerns that they have? And sometimes things do align up, other things do not. So, I mean, I've had those things, but my counter to it is looking at everything in their life. If anything has changed, like a major stressor or lack of sleep because of maybe a change in work schedule, and then if all those things are fine, then I will do blood work to see what's going on the inside. And I always encourage my patients and clients to get their blood work done. For clients specifically, I'm like, if you can, do it like twice a year, just to kind of see like where things are at. And if things are looking good when you do it twice in 1 year, then maybe you could just do it once a year moving forward, unless there's like a red flag that stands out. So thankfully, we've been able to address those issues. Like most recently, I had a client who has been to the T perfect on everything and was just gaining a bunch of weight. So I was like, okay, well, we might be too high in a surplus. So we got to pull the calories back and readjust. And then we pulled those calories back. She ended up losing weight and now is more of a sustainable, weight gain that I would say. So sometimes it also takes the coach to take a step back and say, okay, do we need to reconstruct things as well? So that's kind of just different things, an example of how I would approach those hard situations where you question yourself as a dietitian or a professional.
Yeah, I love your answer because sometimes it's just a matter of looking at the whole picture and not just the one thing. And that was one of the things that I feel a lot of coaches missed is, okay, I am not looking at the blood work. What is probably happening around that? Or maybe it could be just like you are not even accounting for little things that may have changed. They can be very subtle, like you may be a little bit less active. Maybe your NEAT has gone down by a significant amount, but you don't really notice up until this point, or there's been a lot of stressors or poor sleep, or maybe just an alteration of your hormones, given that maybe you're entering perimenopause. And sometimes the issue with perimenopause, for example, is that because of there's so many fluctuations, hormonal fluctuations that alter your fluid dynamics as well, sometimes women will feel like they're gaining weight overnight, or they have difficulties losing weight, but they're actually losing body fat. It's just like the weight goes up and down because of those issues. And so I find interesting, especially those coaches and dietitians that have gone and worked with clients to be as lean as when we're working with competitors, that they can be so lean that you can see the minimal difference that happen with your body weight and like even your appearance in moments like hours, in times in one day, when you have someone that is so lean and so shredded, that you can see like how small little changes can change the appearance of someone, or the physique very drastically. Like when you're doing the pig week, there's a reason why you're manipulating very delicately carbohydrates, sodium, fluids, and like electrolytes and all of those things, because one little thing can enhance a bit more the details. And so I kind of like try to associate all of these things that are playing a big role into the appearance, into someone that may have been exposed to some of these variations and subtle changes due to hormonal fluctuations, or like a women that is going through perimenopause and there's estrogen and progesterone and high cortisol, they are not sleeping well, there's like poor stress management, and there's so many things going on that affecting that weight, the body mass that you were looking in at the scale when you measure your weight. But it's not necessarily truly reflecting what is going on in your current body composition per se. So it can be very, very delicate situation when you're working with these type of clients, because anything can be misinterpreted if you're not looking at the big picture.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, lifestyle factors, even though if it's like a physique athlete, they might say, I've got everything in my life controlled, but sometimes life can throw a curveball and that can cause, fluctuations in our weight, whether it's stress or maybe people are waking up earlier because they have a harder time sleeping as they get leaner. So obviously less sleep that can impact, hunger, that can impact some weight gain, poor recovery. There's a lot of things that need to be looked at when things just aren't going in the right direction.
Yeah. I've heard before that you've mentioned in a few, even in, I think even in your own Instagram feed and in a couple of podcasts that I've heard you doing with Joe Klemczewski, about how your body keeps the score after a dieting phase, especially if we're thinking to when someone gets really, really lean, or they have lost a significant amount of weight, whether it is a contest prep client, a competitor, or someone who lost 30 kilos, 25 kilos or plus. I see this even in like my bariatric surgery patients, they lose 40 plus kilos over a period of time. What do you mean by the body post-diet or after a big weight loss, your body keeps the score? What does that mean?
Yeah, good question. So there's not a lot, but there is more research coming out looking at specifically like bodybuilding, bikini, physique athletes, right? Some of that research is looking at are reverse diets and recovery diets, are those necessary? And what I mean by that is they're looking at like hormones. So when your body keeps the score, right? So let's take a normal person that just works out at the gym. They've never done like a weight loss phase or anything like that. And at baseline, their hormones are normal. Well, now they decide they're going to go into a prep. They start going into a calorie deficit. I always tell everybody this: being beach lean is different than stage lean. Being stage lean, you are much leaner. If you're beach lean, you're maybe halfway to stage lean. And so when we get that lean, hormones do shift because our body down regulates, right? It's kind of like starvation, if you will. Like when we are starved and potentially malnourished, everything in our body slows down because we're not getting enough energy and we're trying to survive. On a smaller scale, when we get stage lean, similar things, we're not getting a lot of energy because we're super lean. We're trying to get ready for the stage. So things slow down, hormones shift and down regulate. And then if we stay lean for a long period of time, things can get lower and lower as far as hormones go. And then when you come out of a long dieting phase, this is kind of what the research is starting to finally look at. How long does it take for hormones to bounce back? A study that I know I had cited in one of our podcasts, I believe it was in 2017 or 2018, it looked more at female competitors. It looked at like bikini and some figure athletes, and they assessed a few different hormones, and they had found that within around 12 weeks, it was like 12 to 16 weeks, um, after their long contest season, most of their hormones bounce back, with the exception of T3, so a thyroid hormone, and testosterone. Some females, they were not back to what their baseline was before dieting. And so what we mean by keeping the score is, like, a person might get really close to getting back to baseline and they could potentially never get there, right? Especially if they're going to
Mhm.
continue to diet. Now, I say that is that's the body's keeping the score, like, hey, like I've been lean here and there. I'm just, I'm just not going to have that same response as I did prior. Now, that's not to scare anybody, because it doesn't mean that eventually your hormones won't get back to baseline. It just might take a little bit longer. And you might function just fine, and life might be just fine by being almost there, but not quite there, if that makes sense, depending on age, depending on the current life situation, like if you're trying to get pregnant, depending on, when your next contest season is, depending on how your energy and your sleep and recovery, like there's a lot of other factors, but your body will take this, or your body will keep the score every time that you're trying to get lean, or if you're trying to stay too lean for too long. I know we were talking right before the recording, just kind of like where you're at with your weight. And I think, if people are going to be active competitors, they certainly need to be at least 10 to 15 pounds before above stage weight, especially if they're going to be competing again. Some people might need to be 20 or 30 pounds above stage weight. And then on the opposite coin, right, if we gain too much weight and we carry too much weight, we can also see hormones not be optimal. So it's finding that perfect balance, which is why it's important to do blood work, but it's also important to look at the blood work and look at how we're feeling and how we're recovering, and making sure we're just doing the right things to put our health in order, because being that lean for that long is not the most healthy thing, and we know this. So
I've read in a few papers, I'm listening to great researchers like Eric Helms, Eric Trexler, referring to metabolic adaptation, and what one thing that seems to be very determinant of how these hormones shift and how your body keeps the score is almost determined by how much lean body mass you lose in the process. How true is that, or like what's been your experience in terms of like looking at the different things that could be contributing to that metabolic adaptation or metabolic slowdown or hormone down regulation? So which hormones do you see to being the most down regulated? You mentioned T3, thyroid hormone, and even like estrogen and testosterone, but do you see a trend on specific hormones like that correlated to the amount of lean body mass the person may lose over that period of time? Conversely, if you have a client that did, like if we compare two clients, they both lost the same amount of weight, but the difference was that one did, the diet phase lasted for 45 weeks or more, and the other person did half of the time. So they lost the weight much faster compared to the other person. What are your thoughts in there in terms of like the things that are in place that are at risk of being lost if we're thinking about your lean body mass and the speed of weight loss?
yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, to answer the first part of the question, I had mentioned it, we see a dip in like our sex hormones. So we'll see a dip in testosterone or estrogen. We'll see a for sure dip in most like thyroid hormones, TSH, T3, T4. And that makes sense because our thyroid plays such a huge critical role in our metabolism, right? So if we're losing weight and we're slowing things down, then those are going to downregulate. Metabolism will, quote, feel like it's not as great, and that we're just slowing down in general, like our metabolic rate, excuse me, will appear to maybe slow down. We know ghrelin and leptin shift, right? Those are our hunger hormones. We do see this in leaner people, right? We have ghrelin can go up and leptin can go down. That's why we feel super hungry and ravenous and not satisfied. That's why having more volume foods can be beneficial because it makes us feel better and fuller. So we see a shift in ghrelin and leptin. In terms of when we see if someone's doing a longer diet versus a shorter, and then that shorter they do more extreme aggressive approaches. The interesting thing is, and again, I still need to do some more research, but from my experience and what I've seen, if someone does more of that extreme cut, they tend to sacrifice more muscle tissue, um, and we may see that their labs tank just a lot faster because they're doing a more faster approach. However, when someone does a long approach, like 45 weeks, they may not be impacted as much, but their labs may actually look similar to someone taking the aggressive approach. So some people are going to be like, well, what's the point then? The point is sustainability, right? If
Yeah,
you are accepting the fact I'm going to have a long like season, then you need to be sustainable throughout that season, right? And even if you're going to do like 5 or 6 shows in one year, it's really hard, if you're spreading it out throughout the whole year, it's really hard to like peak perfect for every single show. Like most people are going to look really good for their first couple shows, and they might look a little gassed and tired towards the end of their shows. And that's just that their body saying like, hey man, it is time we need an off season. We need a break. We need to get some calories back in us because it's just so hard. Now there is approaches, to go about doing that to try to quote again sustain throughout that off season. But in terms of labs, we still can see quite a bit of a dip in people's lab values if they're going to diet for a long and extreme period of time. But again, the athlete has to be accepting. This is things like we are talking about athletes, right? There's risk reward, like we discussed earlier. Like if you decide to play soccer, there's a risk reward of injury. If you decide to play volleyball, there's risk reward of injury. Football, whatever. You are accepting that risk. If you are accepting the risk of me, I'm going to be lean for a long period of time, then you are accepting that risk that your hormones are going to be tanked at some point for an extended period of time until you decide to come out of that calorie deficit and take a longer off season. So the athlete has to be accepting of that fact before they get into it. Otherwise, I have seen some people like, wow, this is terrible for you. This sport is so bad because of X, Y, and Z. Well, it can be bad if we decide to put ourselves in that situation for a long period of time and not do things appropriately to prioritize health. Just like other sports have risks, like I had mentioned earlier, you have to do the things necessary to take care of yourself, right? Some people, they have to wear pads and equipment, they have to do more stretching and mobility, they have to hydrate, like it's risk and reward. And so we have to be aware of that and we have to take care of our health in said sport.
I totally agree with you. And I think all sports will have their risks, and you will have the pros and cons of everything, like in any sports is like that. Now, I do have a question around post-diet, because I see the interesting fact that once you have done such a important fat loss phase, regardless whether you are a contest lean or just a general client, general population who got to a decent body fat composition, why after you've completed and finished dieting and you've gotten decently lean, or if you've lost a more than 10 or 15% of your body weight, we hear this phrase of like your body is like a sponge and is just so ready to overshoot fat if you binge or you go way over your calories for several days in a row and you eat massively amount of calories. Why is this happening? Why is this so? It's a very interesting thing that a lot of people don't think about or don't even pay attention to. And that's why we see after people have dieted for so long and lost all the weight, they were able, without trying, obviously no one wants to get fat again, they rebounded back and worse than initially.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of reasons that this could be. So you go through a long or a long contest season, you lose a lot of weight. I had mentioned like ghrelin and leptin shift when we lose weight. Well, the issue is when ghrelin and leptin shift, ghrelin goes up, leptin goes down. People have that struggle of not feeling full postseason, right? So we also have people that that's just like I want to celebrate my success and my victories, as you should, right? But they start reintroducing foods that they weren't eating, right? Foods that are highly palatable, highly enjoyable, and they just start eating and they just start losing that sense of like, man, I'm just so hungry and I don't feel full, and they will eat until they feel full, and then they just don't feel good, right? And then some people will take that like, man, I feel like I've just destroyed myself after like a week of being done with my season. And now we have the psychology of it, right? Where it's like, now I feel bad. Maybe I should just try to restrict and pull calories back to feel better. But now we also have a social aspect of like, well, people want me to go eat and I want to go eat and drink with them because I haven't. So then I go back to this and it turns into this big spiral of events. And next thing you know, people have gained 20, 30 pounds back within the first month of no longer dieting. And to your point earlier, when people are saying like our body is like a sponge, because I've kind of tried to relay this. I'm not saying we are malnourished as bodybuilders, but our body responds similarly when we go to such restricted calories before peak week that everything is just dependent on running a lot slower because it's not getting enough. That is just basic, like our calories in, our calories out, we're burning, we're losing, like our body is just slowing down. And now when we start reintroducing things to our body, it's like, oh my gosh, I have not had this in a long time. I need to store it for energy. I want to store this as energy so I can feel better, so I can function better, right? So that's where like reverse dieting or the recovery diet, for those that don't know, a reverse diet is you're slowly adding calories back in. A recovery diet is you are immediately going to your, estimated calculated energy expect or your basic metabolic rate immediately. So let's say you are like, my new metabolic rate is this, and I'm going to be working out here. So I'm doing the math. So let's just say my new maintenance calories is 2,200. Well, I'm going to go from 1,200 to 2,200 calories immediately. That's kind of like the thought process of like a recovery diet. A reverse diet is like, well, we're going to get you to the 2,200 calories. We're just going to take a slower approach and make things more gradual. So that's kind of where people that were like kind of binge eating and gaining all this weight post season, why the reverse and recovery diet got popular, because they both kind of yield similar and different results in that like people start to feel better when they reintroduce the food, right? That's a similar thing between the reverse and the recovery diet. Some people, their hunger is so bad post show, they start reintroducing food and their hormones again are trying to readjust to this new adaptation being placed upon them. And people are like, I just feel like trash. I feel worse now than when I was dieting. So then people are like, okay, well, we're going to get you on the recovery diet. We're just going to put you to 2,200 calories right away. And the 2,200 is just an arbitrary number. I'm just using this as an example, mind you. This isn't like a everybody should do this. But now you start to feel better. So that can be a benefit of recovery diet. Like people just start to feel better, but they might gain a lot of weight really fast. But it's like also, they're still checking in with their coach, making sure things aren't getting out of hand. Where again, that reverse diet, it's kind of, I like to say a happy medium, and it's an approach I like to take where it's like, we're going to add food to you every single week. We're going to make sure your weight gain isn't super rapid, and we're going to get you to those 2,200 calories. And we're going to monitor things like hunger. We're going to monitor things like body composition. We're going to monitor things like recovery and strength gains. And we're going to just take that nice approach. So you can have that period of time where you can kind of readjust your body composition, where instead of gaining 30 pounds back in a month, you maybe gained 8 to 10 pounds in that first month. And then you start to slow down because your food is now higher. You've gained some weight back. You look better. You don't look like you blew it all, in those 30 days. And we can slowly titrate up the calories, you know, from there. So, anyways, to give more context and reasoning to your answer, that's kind of why I wanted to explain the big broad picture of that.
Now it totally makes sense. Although I think I did speak with, I had a bit of a conversation with Lake Norton and maybe even Eric Helms about these concepts of recovery diet, the reverse diet. And it seems like it's been lately there was at the beginning when these terms came out, I think there was a bit of a confusion with like, okay, so what's the purpose of the reverse diet versus the recovery diet? What's the approach, the ideal approach for a particular person? I understand that when you do a reverse diet, you actually go straight to your current maintenance, not your previous maintenance calories, which is like, obviously you have a new body weight, you've lost 20 pounds or whatever. So obviously you won't have the total daily energy expenditure of someone who was 20 kilos or 20 pounds heavier than now. So you may go like, maybe your new estimated maintenance calories is around 1900, given the fact that you're including everything that you're doing right now, the cardio, the daily steps, the energy expenditure with your weights, all of that is adding up to your current estimated maintenance calories. And the difference between that and your previous maintenance calories, which could be a difference of saving 700 or 600 calories, that's the kind of like the work that is done with the reverse diet. Like you start adding on top of that until you get to that previous maintenance calories. Whereas when you do recovery diet, you literally just almost aim to get to that previous maintenance calories, which gives you not just your current calories, but more a little bit of a surplus, like even a 10% surplus, to gain weight as fast as possible, especially if your biofeedback is quite downregulated. Your hunger levels are through the roof, your fatigue levels are through the roof, your libido, your sleep, your hunger, everything, like all of this biofeedback is like completely out of whack. To restore that as fast as possible in the first 3 to 4 weeks, and then pretty much slow down that surplus and kind of like bring it back, or adjust depending on how each week the person is responding. And I say this because after my contest prep and my show, I did kind of like a bit of a combination of both. I did go quite aggressively the first week and a half, but I was allowing myself to be okay to not go, like I gave myself some boundaries. So I could just kind of like honor my hunger cues, listen to how much, if I needed to eat a little bit more, I would allow myself to do it, because I also was paying attention to my psychology and like my relationship with food. I didn't want to fall back into binge eating patterns, or that I suffer from binge eating and bulimia 10 years ago. And when I decided that I wanted to do this prep, I wanted to do it aware that I could fall back into those risks, and I was going to do everything I could possibly do to avoid getting to that stage again. I think it is interesting, all these different strategies that you can implement, and I am sort of like even interested in writing about this approach that I use, because I don't see it is something that is commonly used. Like it's not one thing or the other. I call it like a hybrid approach, because I used some intuitive eating within the approach of reversing, but I also didn't go super slow, but didn't go that aggressively either. It was like a mix of everything. What do you think about doing that sort of approach that is not one thing or the other, but more so like listening to your biofeedback and literally just adjusting your macros and calories as you are recovering? Like if you start looking at all these subjective measurements, hunger, sleep, energy, fatigue, recovery, performance, like if you start looking at all of those things and you start tracking that on a daily basis, and then over a few days, over a few weeks, how things start shifting and kind of like going to the level that you would expect them to consider normal, how would you adjust them based like just more like a reactive approach, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I do a combination of both. So I like with my clients, because every client is different, but some people they're fine taking the slow reverse approach. Some people they want the recovery, but I find myself in the middle with my clients. So I will say, okay, here's your calories, what you've been eating. Here's kind of the calculated adjusted new calories based on your current metabolic rate where you're at. Here's how we're going to kind of meet in the middle and adjust. Here's the goal. I explain everything to like my clients. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the goal we're going to work towards. But I also need your feedback because again, you might start to be like, man, I am super hungry. Cool. Okay. Like, how hungry are you? Like, how bad is it? Like, because it's okay to be a little hungry, but if you're having like really bad hunger pains and you're having a hard time sleeping, okay, now we know we need to be a little more aggressive in our, how we're bumping calories and how we're doing these things. So we just make that adjustment. And again, if some people are like, I want to get back to where I was, then I have the discussion with them like, okay, if you want to get back to what your old maintenance calories were, here are some things that we need to be aware of. You're going to see faster weight gain. So if you were okay with that, then that's fine. Just be aware because some people, they're not okay gaining that much weight right away. They want to take like that slower approach, like I had mentioned. They want to have maybe a quarter of a pound gained a week versus like gaining 1 pound a week. So it's just looking at that person. But I personally like to do in the middle approach where we're gaining weight at a reasonable weight, or excuse me, we're gaining weight at a reasonable rate and we are increasing calories probably a little bit more than you would during a traditional reverse, but not doing it as aggressive as like a recovery diet, at least for the first 4 to 6 weeks. Then everything slows down. We try to slow down the weight gain. We try to still increase calories, but not as much as we were doing in those first 4 to 6 weeks. Because those first 4 to 6 weeks for people is a tough transition coming from a long season into a maintenance slash off season.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And would you say that is ideal to go or transition straight into when you say off season, into a building phase straight away? Or do you reckon it is better to try to maintain relatively stable your weight for a little bit, maybe a month before you kind of actually start doing a surplus and work on your building phase?
Yeah, I think when people can get to a spot where they're happy, I think it's good to hold on to that spot for a while. It could be a month, could be 3 months. I think the hardest part for people is like they have a little bit of a softer look than their stage, and they're like, oh, I can tell that the lines and the cuts are fading. That's kind of sad. And then all of a sudden they might gain a little more weight and they can't see it as much as they did before. And they're like, I don't know if I want to be here. So I think having it be an approach of like, hey, we've got you to a pretty good spot. You still could have your food a lot higher. It's still kind of low, but we can hang out right here for a month or two because you're feeling good. We're seeing very minimal weight gain, if any. Um, and then we also have to look at other factors like strength and recovery in the gym. If you're still
Mhm.
incredibly sore and your strength is tanking or it's not going up, then we probably need to put on a little bit more weight or at least increase the calories more to give you better energy levels to perform better and recover better. So those are some other factors that need to be considered. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with like we get to a certain point, we hang out there for a month or two, maybe make some adjustments. You just have to, make sure that person is willing to be that patient because unfortunately some people just don't want to be that patient.
Yeah. Now, I know we are a little bit over the time that you mentioned that you'd have. Do you need to go, or can I ask you a section of true and false and overrated, underrated?
I got just a couple more minutes. I could answer a question or two. Yeah.
Okay, so this one are going to be just basically a rapid fire questions. You need to say true or false, overrated, underrated, and kind of like a very brief rationale of why you are giving me that answer. So in true or false, coaches can fix your hormones. True or false?
Oh boy. My mind wants to say false, but I'm also a coach. So I mean, I'm not an endocrinologist, so I'm probably going to say more on the side of false just because a lot of coaches claim that they can fix hormones. I'm not saying, we can't have people implement good health practices that can help shift hormones in the right direction, but nobody's an endocrinologist or anything like that. So I think that that can be a bit stretched to the truth. I think it's good that people are paying attention to hormones. I think it's good that people want to make sure they're at optimal levels, but it's not like coaches are doctors at the same time. So it depends on how extreme that situation is. So
Okay. In the lead up to a show, pulling back on cardio and increasing food intake is beneficial. True or false?
true, as much as people do not want to believe that, I have had people struggle with like, I feel like I need to be doing more and more and more and more. It's like you've done the work. Your body is ready to be introduced to more food. So it doesn't mean that you cut out all of your exercise and cardio as you start increasing calories during peak week. It just means you don't have to do as much because you should, in theory, be already stage lean. And so by still exercising and doing some cardio and adding more food, you're going to fill that physique out. But you may even look better not having to do as much of that, cardio or weights, if you will.
And that helps to reduce some inflammation as well. The next question, if you are in a healthy weight and your body fat distribution and a good body fat distribution, you are considered always healthy. True or false?
False. False, because what's on the outside doesn't tell us what's on the inside. I have lots of people that look healthy on the inside that have lots of problems on the inside once I see their lab values. So again, there's a lot of healthy people that have thyroid problems. There's a lot of healthy people. When I say healthy, they appear healthy. A lot of healthy looking people that have kidney disease, their kidneys aren't functioning appropriately. Like, it doesn't tell the whole truth. So, I mean, there's people that look healthy that have high triglycerides. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily healthy. It just means that we need to address certain things. But what's on the outside doesn't tell us exactly what's on the inside. Now, again, if you're implementing a healthy lifestyle and you're maintaining a healthy body weight, like you said, there's probably good odds that you are healthy overall. But get your blood work done. Make sure you're taking care of yourself on the insides too.
Yep, 100%. Now, next one. A higher carbohydrate, lower fat diet is more beneficial for weight loss and overall health compared to a keto diet. True or false?
Based on research, I was going to say true, from what we've seen, for a lot of reasons. One, just research alone shows that like a lower carb, or I'm sorry, a lower fat diet can be beneficial. But in terms of dieting and stuff on a ketogenic diet, there's a big problem with adherence. Not many people can stick to that. We also know that if we consume too much dietary fat, that actually has decreased like hormones like testosterone. And I know there are people that have done bodybuilding shows on a ketogenic diet, but at the same time, our body also loves carbohydrates. It loves that from a performance standpoint. And when I see someone that's filled out with carbohydrates versus trying to fill out with fats, in my experience, most of the time, the people that fill out with carbohydrates, they look just slightly better than the people that fill out with fats. So there's a lot of reasons why, I would put somebody on more of what we would call a traditional diet versus like the ketogenic diet in terms of getting ready for a physique sport.
Overrated, underrated. Now, hormone health, is that overrated or underrated?
At one point in time, I would say it was underrated. Now I think it's shifting to being more popularized. So I think it is important to know that our hormones are in a healthy spot. So I don't know if I'm ready to say it's overrated just yet, but I do know a lot of coaches are blowing it up to be such a big thing because they claim that they have the key to fixing hormones, which they don't. That's a topic for another day.
Okay. Metabolic building before contest or before the contest. Overrated or underrated?
Right now, I would say in my experience, I think it's even a little more underrated just because so many people that I have seen, they want to compete year after year after year. And it's like you do need to make sure that you are spending enough time out of a deficit. And you need to make sure that your metabolism is a good spot so that the next prep is smoother. I don't want to say easier because, being in prep for a long time, it can be hard, but it needs to go smoother. If you're constantly dieting year after year to do show after show, you're just making it harder on yourself. And most, let's say, natural athletes, they really don't look much improved if they're going to be competing in their third season in a row. So I do think having some good metabolic health needs to be a little more prioritized right now, just from what I'm seeing, because so many people want to compete year after year.
All right, last question. Carving up aggressively in the lead up to a show. Overrated, underrated?
I guess in terms of being aggressive, I guess we could look at like a rapid backload versus a traditional loading phase. I think it can be a little overrated. Don't get me wrong, I think it's awesome that people can eat 1,000 carbs before a show and still look good on stage. It's definitely a gamble if you don't have time to test out that protocol where you eat 1,000 carbs, less than 12 hours, 24 hours before you get on the stage, and you make that slight mistake and then just look terrible on stage, where I feel like you definitely want to increase carbs. I just don't know if it needs to be that aggressive. It's a time and a place for it for sure, but overall, people need to make sure if they are doing things right, they have time to test out their peak week.
100%. Well, Austin, thank you so much for your time, for everything that you have shared with us. Where can people find you? Is there any project for you coming up?
Yeah, you can just find me Facebook or Instagram. Austin Kjergaard is the handle, and Dr. Joe Klemczewski and I, we are on YouTube. We have Contest Prep University, Peak Intel. We have Flexible Dieting Institute podcast. Yeah, those are probably the best spots to find me. Right now, projects are just putting out more content for people and just getting ready for the bodybuilding season as we'll be kind of traveling to shows and whatnot and helping clients. So, yeah, just getting ready for that.
Awesome. Well, have a great week, and I hope to see you very soon.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
This podcast will be ready in a week or two, so I'll let you know, and we'll share it to the world.
Perfect. It sounds good.
Awesome. Bye bye, Austin.